Get ready for the big revival. The real estate revival, that is. Now on 77 WABC, your New York weekend.
Get ready for the big revival.
It's Rand on Real Estate. With Greg Rand.
Welcome to Rand on Real Estate. This is Greg Rand, your host on 77 WABC. Today we're going to be talking about the Great Depression. But wait, don't turn the dial. It's not what you think. The Great Depression has been talked about a lot lately, and it's caused your humble host to go do a couple of years' worth of research to understand what really happened 65 or so years ago and how related is it really to what's happening today. And so we're going to get into an in-depth discussion on that. We're also going to have somebody on this show who lived through it, and he's going to tell his story, but we're not going to talk about the soup lines. We're not going to talk about people jumping off of buildings when the stock market crashed. We're going to talk about how regular everyday Americans, or at least this case, this regular everyday American and his family, survived and even thrived by being good old-fashioned bootstrapping Americans, entrepreneurs, and working with what they had to make something happen for themselves. So this should be a twist on the Great Depression talk that you haven't heard before, and I certainly hope you enjoy it. We're also going to talk, well, let's jump right in with what is, if you're a listener of the show, you know my favorite segment. It's called Smart People Saying Dumb Things About Real Estate, and I've got an endless supply of material. When I first started doing this, I thought, well, I'll do this Smart People Saying Dumb Things, and then if somebody else says something dumb, well, then I'll use it again. But it's become a regular segment on the show because every week there's a whole host of people who are, you know, some of them are chief economists of some organization or another. Some of them are Wall Streeters, you know, stock jocks or hedge fund CEOs or something else. A lot of them are anchor people in the news. And let's not forget the politicians. All of them are experts on the real estate market. And, you know, listen, what we know, or what I know, because I grew up in this business, I've been in it my entire life. I know it inside and out. And I know I can smell a fraud when I see one. And there's a lot of people out there who think, I guess because their understanding of the residential market is they live in one. Their understanding of the commercial real estate market is that they shop at the mall and they go to an office to work every day. And that pretty much qualifies them to be experts. So we have an endless supply of great material for the show to play their audio clips and laugh at the things they say. But we're going to do a different twist on it today. We're going to do a segment called Smart People Getting Rich and Famous by Picking Losers. And going out and doing research for the show, preparation for the show, I keep my ears out and read everything I can and try to find people saying things about this. And I started to see a pattern, and maybe you've seen the pattern also. There are some people who are famous. They're on television all the time, and the reason why they're on is that they called the Great Depression #2, or they called the housing meltdown, or they were the first ones to predict the tech stock bubble. They're basically people who are getting famous for picking losers. And what's more is they've developed this, what I call the vocabulary of doom. You know, you can't just get out there and say, I think the real estate market is going to go through another decline in value when the foreclosures hit next year. You have to say it's going to be a free fall. You know, you say it's a decline in value, nobody calls you back. You say it's a free fall, collapse, plummeting is one of their favorite words out there. You get the drift. You know the vocabulary of doom. But it's interesting. I found 3 people who were especially good at this. They really learned how to play the media using this technique. So why don't we go ahead and play the clip, and we'll talk about each one of them afterwards. Go.
Some market watchers see an even more precipitous drop in the dollar's future. One of those men, Peter Schiff. He's the founder and president of Euro-Pacific Capital and author of Crash Proof: How to Profit from the Coming Economic Collapse. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Strong words. Economic collapse. What's collapsing, and when's it going to happen? Why?
Well, I think the dollar is going to collapse, and with it, basically the American standard of living and the way of life that we all are accustomed to.
My next guest is Gerald Celente. He is director and founder of the Trends Research Institute, the perfect guy to have, and he prides himself on a strong track record of accurate predictions. First of all, panic of 2008. You were spot on in the panic of 2008. You talk about the crash of 2010. What's that? Means we are going to be, the money we have in our pocket will buy a lot less.
You got it.
So how much less? How about, are you talking hyperinflation, 1,000% a year?
Maybe start at 40% less.
The co-creator of the index says this decline may continue for some time. Here's Robert Schiller, chief economist at Macro Markets and a professor at Yale University. Lest we not forget, he also correctly predicted the collapse of the housing market.
Lest we not forget, he is an expert because he predicted the collapse of the housing market. Now, I don't know about you, but if you own a piece of real estate in the New York area, your property value didn't collapse. Maybe it appreciated a little bit too much and you gave some back, but it didn't collapse. But you get the point. Those 3 clips, starting with Peter Schiff, who's a favorite of ours here on the show, who, by the way, we like him very much. We want him to win the Senate seat up in Connecticut, and we think he knows his stuff when it comes to macroeconomics. We just have some bones to pick with him when it comes to his view on real estate. And you heard him talk about the collapse of the American way of life. Well, if there was ever any example of people that, when it was a recession, that wasn't sexy enough, then it became the next Great Depression. That just wasn't sexy enough. And then we had all this vocab of doom between collapse and so forth. Now, it's not the dollar that's collapsing, it's the American way of life that's collapsing. Well, I don't buy that. I don't think you buy that. But surely it gets you a lot of appearances on TV. But my new friend of the show, Jerry Salente, I like this guy. He was very interesting, and you heard the commentator on the show say that, or the anchor of that show say that he has basically predicted a whole bunch of things right. He is a trend guru. And so I did a little bit of research to take a look at some of the trends that Jerry has predicted. And so here's a list off of their website. Well, of course, he forecasted the Great Recession. He predicted the panic of 2008. You heard a reference to that in the clip. The coming Great Depression, the Second American Revolution. Oh, here's a gold bull run, so there's something positive. The real estate boom, but then the decline. The dot-com bust, the Asian financial crisis. He warned of terrorism pre-9/11, tax protests, the credit crisis, the demise of American automakers. Oh, here's a good one, gourmet coffee. Okay, so he picked, that was back in, I'm going from the top to the bottom in his list here. That was back in 1988. So I think back in 1988, he had a good cup of coffee and said, I predict the burgeoning of gourmet coffee. But since then, he realized that if you want to get play on the television networks, you have to talk about things like collapses and busts and crises and so forth. And you know what? I look at this and I say, none of this was all that hard. And I decided I'm going to make some predictions myself. And I want to show you just how easy this really is. I've got a few predictions of things that are practically guaranteed to come to pass, but they're going to bona fide me as a trend predictor in my own right. First of all, BlackBerry sales are going to decline in the coming future. BlackBerry sales. Oh, wait, did I say decline? BlackBerry sales are going to collapse in the coming future. I forgot. I have to do this right? If I want to get on CNBC, I have to say collapse as often as possible. BlackBerry sales are going to collapse. Now, why do I predict that? Because the iPhone is so popular. Not that complicated. And now the Droid came out, so BlackBerry is competing with Google and Apple. Doesn't look good for them as far as I'm concerned. That's my prediction. Textbook printing for college students is going to collapse because of the iPad. See, it's not that complicated. And then here's my favorite. I predicted in the Northern Hemispheres, come November of this year, we're going to have massive global cooling. But then by May of 2011, we're going to have massive global warming. These are my predictions, and hopefully you'll listen here long enough to see them all come true. But in the meantime, in the next segment, you're listening to Rand on Real Estate, and in the next segment, we're going to get a little more into the Great Depression, talk about some specifics of what happened back then, and are there really parallels to what's happening today? This is Greg Rand, Rand on Real Estate on 77 WABC. Welcome.